My grandmother looked at the peeling paint of the homeless shelter behind me, then down at my shivering 6-year-old daughter. She did not offer a hug or a warm blanket. Instead, she adjusted her mink coat and offered a threat that froze my blood colder than the Chicago wind. "You have 72 hours, Layla. You have 72 hours to tell me where the $3 million from the Green Street mansion went, or I am filing for emergency custody of this child." I stood there paralyzed in the snow, my worn-out sneakers soaking up the slush. What mansion? I had been homeless for 3 months, eating canned beans and sleeping on a cot because my mother told me we had absolutely nothing left. I had no idea that I was actually the owner of a fortune that had been stolen from me by the very people I trusted most. Before I tell you how I went from sleeping in a shelter to exposing the biggest fraud in my family history, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever discovered a secret that changed how you see your own parents. My name is Layla. I am 33 years old, and until an hour ago, I believed I was a failure. The night had started like every other night in the Haven, a temporary shelter on the west side of Chicago. The air inside smelled of industrial-strength bleach and unwashed bodies, a combination that stuck to the back of your throat. My daughter Maya was curled up on her cot, her small body radiating heat. Her forehead was burning. Every cough that racked her chest felt like a physical blow to my own heart. I checked my pockets again, but they were empty. I had used my last $5 to buy a warm meal for us yesterday. I walked over to the front desk where Marcus, the night guard, was scrolling through his phone. He was a large man who had seen too much misery to be moved by it anymore. "Marcus, please," I whispered, trying not to wake the other families sleeping in the rows behind me. "Maya is burning up. Her fever is spiking. I just need to run to the pharmacy down the block for some children's Tylenol. I will leave my ID. I will be back in 10 minutes. Marcus did not even look up. "You know the rules, Layla. Doors locked at 8. If you step out, you do not come back in until 6 in the morning." "But she is sick," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "It is 10 degrees outside. We cannot sleep on the street. Then keep her here and wait for the clinic to open tomorrow," he said flatly. "If you go out, I give your bed to the next person on the wait list." I walked back to our cot, defeated. I took off my thin cardigan and wrapped it around Maya, doubling her layers. I sat on the cold floor beside her, holding her hand and praying. I was a paralegal. I had graduated with honors. I had worked for one of the top law firms in the city for 10 years. How did I end up here? How did a few months of bad luck and my mother's constant reminders of my incompetence strip me of everything? Suddenly, the room was illuminated by blinding white lights sweeping across the frosted windows. The hum of a powerful engine vibrated through the thin walls, distinct from the usual rattle of city buses. It was a silence that spoke of money, a heavy silence. Marcus stood up, walking to the window. "Who the hell is parking a Rolls-Royce in front of a shelter?" he muttered. My heart stopped. I knew that car. I knew the custom matte black finish and the Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament. It belonged to the only person in my family who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. Big Mama Hattie, my grandmother. I had not seen her in 4 years since she moved to Florida to retire. My mother told me Hattie wanted nothing to do with me because I was a disappointment. Mom said Hattie was ashamed of my divorce and my financial struggles, so I never called. I was too ashamed. "Layla Thorne," Marcus called out. "There is an old lady out here asking for you. She says she has 5 minutes before she leaves you here to rot." I scrambled up, pulling Maya into my arms. I wrapped her in the itchy wool blanket provided by the shelter and rushed to the door. Marcus unlocked it with a grunt. The wind hit us first, biting and cruel. Then I saw her. Hattie stood next to the Phantom, leaning on her silver-tipped cane. She looked like a queen who had accidentally wandered into a war zone. Her eyes, sharp and judging, swept over the shelter, then over me, and finally landed on Maya. I expected her to be horrified by our condition. I expected her to ask why we were here. Instead, she looked at me with pure disgust. "So it is true," she said, her voice low and steady. "Camille told me you were struggling, but I did not think you would sink this low. Look at you, Layla. You look like a junkie." I flinched. "Grandma, I am not on drugs. I lost my job. The rent went up. Mom said there was no room for us at her house because Dad is sick." Hattie laughed a cold, humorless sound. "No room. And what about your house? What about the property on South Green Street?" I stared at her confused. The wind whipped my hair across my face. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, girl." Hattie stepped closer, her expensive perfume mixing with the smell of exhaust. "I gave you that house for your 25th birthday. I signed the deed over to you before I left for Florida. It is a historic landmark. It is worth $2 million. And you are telling me you are sleeping in a homeless shelter because you have nowhere to go." My mind raced. I remembered my 25th birthday. I remembered Mom handing me a stack of papers, saying it was some trust fund documents from Grandma that needed signing for tax purposes. I remembered signing them without reading because I trusted my mother. I was young and I thought my parents had my back. Mom told me that house was sold 8 years ago. I stammered, my teeth chattering. "She said you sold it to pay off Dad's gambling debts before you moved. She said there was nothing left." Hattie's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. She studied my face, looking for a lie. She saw my worn-out boots. She saw the desperation in how I held Maya. She saw the genuine confusion in my eyes. "Your mother told me you were renting that house out," Hattie said slowly, each word heavy. "She told me you were using the rental income to fund a drug habit. She told me that is why you never called, that is why you never visited, because you were too high to care about your family." "No," I gasped, tears freezing on my cheeks. "Grandma, I have never touched a drug in my life. Mom told me you hated me. She said you did not want to see me." Hattie stood there for a long moment, the gears turning in her sharp mind. She looked at the shelter again. Then she looked at the heavy gold watch on her wrist. "I do not know who is lying, Layla," she said, her voice hardening again. "But I know what I see. I see my great-granddaughter living in squalor. I see a woman who looks broken. And I see a family legacy being dragged through the mud." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. She did not hand me cash. She did not offer me a ride. "You have 72 hours, she repeated, the ultimatum hanging in the frozen air. "I am staying at the peninsula. You come to me with proof. Proof that you still own that house. Proof that you are clean. And proof of where the money went. If you cannot prove it, I assume you sold it and smoked the profits. And if that is the case, I will call Child Protective Services and I will take Maya. I will raise her myself because clearly you are unfit." "But Grandma, how can I prove it?" I cried, clutching Maya tighter. "I have nothing. I do not even have a phone." "That is not my problem," Hattie said, turning back to the car. "You were the smartest paralegal in your firm, Layla. Use your brain, or lose your child." The heavy door of this Rolls-Royce slammed shut, sealing her inside the warm leather interior. As the car pulled away, disappearing into the snowy night, I stood there clutching the business card. The realization hit me harder than the cold. My mother had not just kicked me out when I was down. She had stolen a mansion from me. She had been living off my inheritance for 8 years while I scraped by. And she had painted me as a drug addict to keep my grandmother away. I looked down at Maya, who was shivering against my chest. A fire ignited in my stomach, burning hot enough to melt the ice in my veins. They thought I was weak. They thought Layla the doormat would just fade away in this shelter. I turned back to the door where Marcus was waiting to lock us in. "I am not losing you, Maya," I whispered into her hair. "Mommy is going to get our house back, and then we are going to burn theirs to the ground." The taillights of my grandmother's Rolls-Royce disappeared into the swirling snow, leaving me standing there with a heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. 72 hours. That was all I had. 3 days to unravel a mystery that had apparently been ruining my life for the better part of a decade without me even knowing it. My daughter Maya tugged at my freezing hand, her small voice trembling as she asked if we were in trouble. I looked down at her innocent face flushed with fever and forced a smile that felt like it might crack my skin. No, baby, we are not in trouble, I lied. We are just going on an adventure. But first, I need to make a phone call. I knew I could not make this call from the front desk of the shelter. Marcus the guard was already suspicious, and I could not risk him overhearing a conversation about millions of dollars and missing mansions. He would think I was delusional and call social services immediately. I had to find a payphone. In 2024, finding a working payphone on the west side of Chicago was harder than finding a diamond in a gutter, but I remembered seeing one near the gas station 2 blocks away. We trudged through the slush, the wind cutting through my thin coat like a knife. When we reached the gas station, the phone was there covered in graffiti and grime, the receiver dangling by a metal cord. I picked it up and prayed for a dial tone. The hum of the line was the most beautiful sound I had heard all day. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my last handful of coins. These quarters were supposed to be for the laundromat to wash the only clothes we owned. Now they were the price of truth. My fingers were numb as I dialed the number I knew by heart. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost hoped she would not answer. I almost hoped I could stay in the dark a little longer because deep down, I was terrified of what I was about to confirm. "Hello," came a voice smooth and irritated. "Mom, it is me, Layla." There was a pause on the other end. In the background, I could hear the soft chiming of Zen music and the gentle splash of water. She was at a spa. Of course she was. While her granddaughter was burning up with a fever in a homeless shelter, my mother Camille was likely getting a mud wrap to prepare for her city council campaign launch. "Layla," she sighed, and I could picture her rolling her eyes. "I told you not to call me during my treatments. I have the campaign manager meeting me in an hour, and I need to be centered. What do you want? Do you need money again? Because I already told you things are tight with your father's medical bills." I gripped the freezing metal of the phone receiver tighter. "I do not want your money, Mom. I just saw Grandma Hattie." The silence that followed was instant and heavy. The Zen music in the background seemed to get louder. "What are you talking about?" Camille asked, her voice dropping an octave. "Your grandmother is in Florida. She is not coming back until next month. You must be mistaken." "She was just here, Mom," I said, my voice shaking not from the cold, but from rage. She pulled up to the shelter in her Phantom. She looked me in the eye and asked me why I was not living in the house on South Green Street. She said she gave it to me. She said she signed the deed over to me 8 years ago. For a second I thought the line had gone dead. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. "Oh, Layla, honey," Camille said, and her tone shifted instantly from irritation to that condescending sweetness that always made my skin crawl. "That is exactly why we had to distance ourselves from her. You know how Grandma gets. Her mind is not what it used to be. She forgets things. She confuses the past with her imagination. It is dementia, Layla. It is tragic, really." I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the graffiti-covered plastic of the phone booth. Dementia. It was a convenient excuse. But Grandma Hattie had looked sharp as a tack. Her eyes were clear. Her threat was specific. "She did not sound confused, Mom," I pressed. "She sounded angry. She said she gave me the house for my 25th birthday. She wants to know why I am homeless if I own a $2 million property." "Layla, stop it!" Camille snapped, her patience evaporating. "Listen to yourself. You sound crazy. Do you really think if you owned a mansion I would let you sleep in a shelter? We sold that house years ago." "Do not you remember?" "No, I do not remember," I said. "Because I never signed anything." "You were in a bad place back then," Camille said, her voice gaining speed the way it always did when she was building a narrative. "You were depressed after law school. You were struggling to find work. You signed a power of attorney so I could handle your assets and pay off your student loans. We sold the house to keep you afloat, to keep you out of trouble. God, Layla, after everything I have done to protect you, this is how you repay me. By accusing me of stealing. I stood there freezing on the street corner and let her words wash over me. But this time, instead of drowning in them, I analyzed them. For 10 years, I had worked as a senior paralegal. I had reviewed thousands of contracts. I had listened to hundreds of depositions. I knew the cadence of a liar. Liars over-explain. Liars attack the character of the questioner instead of answering the question. And most importantly, liars get the details wrong when they are panicked. You said you sold it to pay my student loans, I said quietly. But Mom, I paid off my student loans myself 2 years ago. I worked double shifts. I ate ramen noodles for 3 years. If you sold a $2 million house to pay my loans, why did I still have to pay them? There was a stumble in her voice. A microsecond of hesitation. It was other debts, Layla. Your father's medical bills. We needed the money. We are a family. We help each other. But you would not understand that, would you? You have always been so selfish, just like your grandmother. Then she played her trump card. The one she knew would hurt the most. You know what I think, she hissed. I think you are using again. I think you are hallucinating. Maybe Grandma is right to be worried. Maybe you are not fit to take care of Maya. If you keep harassing me with these delusions, I will have to call Child Protective Services myself. For Maya's safety. The threat hung in the air, mirroring the one my grandmother had just made. Both the matriarchs of my family were threatening to take my child, but for very different reasons. One wanted the truth. The other wanted to bury it. I did not scream. I did not cry. A cold clarity settled over me, sharper than the Chicago winter. Okay, Mom, I said, my voice flat. You are right. I must be confused. I am sorry. Go back to your massage. I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I stood there for a moment, listening to the dial tone fade into the roar of the city traffic. My mother was lying. I knew it in my bones. I knew it with every fiber of my legal training. She had mentioned a power of attorney, a document I never remembered signing. But she had slipped up. She said she sold the house. If she sold the house, then why did Grandma Hattie say she expected me to be living there? If the house was sold, strangers would be living there. Grandma would have seen strangers. Unless the house was never sold. Unless my family was still using it. I looked down at the last of my coins. I had enough for a bus ticket back to the shelter, or I had enough for a rideshare to the south side. I looked at Maya. She was shivering uncontrollably now. We needed a warm place to stay. But more than that, we needed the truth. If that house was mine, I had the legal right to enter it. I had the legal right to break down the door if I had to. Mommy, where are we going? Maya asked, her teeth chattering as I led her away from the shelter, away from the only safety we had known for months. We are going home, baby, I whispered, pulling her close to shield her from the wind. We are going to check on a house. I pulled out my phone, which only worked on Wi-Fi, and connected to the gas station's open network. I opened the rideshare app. The fare to South Green Street was exactly the amount I had left in my digital wallet. It would leave me with $0.00. I did not hesitate. I booked the ride. As we waited for the car to arrive, I made a silent vow. My mother thought she could gaslight me. She thought she could use my poverty and my love for my daughter as a weapon to keep me silent. She thought Layla the paralegal was dead and buried under the weight of failure. But she was wrong. She had just awoken the only person who knew exactly where she buried the bodies. And I was coming to dig them up. The car pulled up and I opened the door, ushering Maya into the warmth. Heading to South Green Street, the driver confirmed. Yes, I said, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. South Green Street, and do not stop until we get to the front door. The Uber driver looked at me in the rearview mirror with a mixture of pity and skepticism as we turned onto South Green Street. It was a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured with nail scissors and the air smelled of old money and private security patrols. My reflection in the glass looked like a ghost haunting the living. I was wearing the same clothes I had slept in at the shelter for 3 days. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and my eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. We pulled up to number 404, and my breath caught in my throat. It was exactly as I remembered it, a stately Victorian masterpiece with ivy climbing the red brick facade, but there were changes. The oak tree I used to climb was gone, replaced by a modern fountain that looked completely out of place. And parked in the driveway right where my father's old sedan used to sit was a brand new Porsche 911 in a screaming shade of yellow. That car cost more than I had earned in the last 5 years combined. I paid the driver with the very last digital credits in my account and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The cold wind bit through my thin coat, but the heat of my anger kept me moving. I told Maya to wait by the gate, shielding her from what I knew would be a painful encounter. I walked up the stone path, each step heavy with the realization that my grandmother was right. The house had not been sold. Strangers did not live here. My family did. I reached the heavy mahogany door and pressed the doorbell. I could hear the chimes echoing inside, a sound that used to signal my father coming home from work, now signaling my intrusion into a life that was supposed to be mine. The door swung open, and I was hit with the scent of expensive lavender oil and kale. Standing there was Brittany, my 25-year-old sister-in-law. She looked like she had just stepped out of a catalog for trophy wives in training. She was wearing a matching Lululemon yoga set that probably cost $300. Her hair was blown out to perfection, and she was sipping a thick green smoothie from a crystal glass. She blinked at me, taking a moment to register who was standing on her porch. Then her expression shifted from confusion to a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. She did not smile. She did not open the door wider. She blocked the entrance with her body, as if I were a contagion. "Oh, Layla," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness that barely covered the venom underneath. "I did not know you were coming by. Is everything okay? You look rough." I stared at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello, Brittany. I need to speak to Trey. Or Mom. Is anyone home?" Brittany laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound. "Trey is sleeping, obviously. He was up late working on his business ideas. And your parents are at the country club. Look, Layla, I am going to be honest with you. This is not really a good time for a charity visit." I felt my nails digging into my palms. Charity visit? I am not here for charity, Brittany. I used to live here. This is my family home. Brittany took a slow sip of her smoothie, looking me up and down, her eyes lingering on my scuffed boots. "Yeah, used to," she emphasized. "But things change, sweetie. Look, we really do not have any cash lying around. If you are hungry, there is a Salvation Army soup kitchen about 5 miles east. They have great resources for people in your situation. Honestly, you should go there before the neighbors call the police. You are kind of bringing down the property value just standing on the porch." The audacity took the air out of my lungs. She was telling me to go to a soup kitchen while standing in the doorway of a house my grandmother bought. I tried to look past her, desperate to see the interior, to find some proof of my ownership. My eyes adjusted to the light of the hallway, and that is when I saw it. The Steinway grand piano. My piano. It was the one thing I had begged my mother to keep safe for me. I had spent thousands of hours on that bench learning Bach and Chopin, pouring my teenage soul into the keys. Now it was shoved against the wall near the coat rack. The lid was closed, and piled on top of its polished ebony surface were muddy sneakers, a stack of unpaid bills, and Trey's gym bag. My most prized possession, a $50,000 instrument, was being used as a glorified shoe rack. "What did you do to my piano?" I whispered, the pain sharper than the insult. Brittany glanced behind her and shrugged. "That old thing, it was taking up space in the living room. We needed room for the new flat screen. Trey wanted to sell it, but your mom said it was too heavy to move right now. Besides, it makes a great table." I stepped forward, my instinct to push past her and rescue my instrument taking over. "Move, Brittany." Suddenly a voice boomed from the top of the stairs. "What is going on down there? I am trying to sleep." Trey appeared on the landing. My younger brother, the golden boy. He was wearing silk pajamas and a heavy gold chain, his eyes bleary from what I assumed was a hangover, not hard work. He walked down the stairs not with the grace of a successful man, but with the arrogance of someone who has never paid a bill in his life. He saw me and stopped. His face twisted into a sneer. "Oh, it is you. I thought I smelled something funny." "Trey," I said, my voice shaking. "Brittany is trying to kick me out. I need to talk to you about the house. Grandma Hattie saw me. She knows." Trey's face went pale for a split second, but he recovered quickly. He descended the rest of the stairs and came to stand beside his wife, presenting a united front of unearned privilege. "Grandma is senile, Layla. We have been over this. And frankly, your desperation is embarrassing. Look at you. You are 33 years old, and you are begging at your little brother's door." "I am not begging," I said, pointing a trembling finger at him. "This house. Grandma signed it to me. Mom said she sold it. But you are here. Why are you here, Trey?" "Because I am the one actually doing something with my life," Trey spat back. "I am an entrepreneur. Mom and Dad gave me this house to help me launch my crypto startup. They invest in winners, Layla, not people who lose their jobs and end up on the street." He reached into the pocket of his silk pajama pants and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He balled it up in his fist and threw it at me. It hit my chest and fell to the doormat, landing right next to my muddy boots. "There," he said. "Go buy yourself a sandwich and a bus ticket to somewhere far away. Do not come back here, Layla. Seriously, if I see you on this property again, I am filing a restraining order. You are trespassing. This is my house. Mine." Brittany smirked, linking her arm through his. "You heard him, Layla. Take the money. It is more than you are worth." For a moment, the world stopped. I looked at the crumpled bill on the doormat. I looked at the piano covered in dirt. I looked at my brother and his wife, two people who were living in luxury on a foundation of lies and theft. They thought they had won. They thought that by throwing money at me, they could make me disappear. They thought I was the same soft, accommodating sister who used to do Trey's homework and cover for his mistakes. But they were looking at the old Layla, the Layla who wanted to be loved. They did not see the Layla who had nothing left to lose. I slowly bent down and picked up the $20 bill. I smoothed it out with deliberate, calm movements. I folded it neatly and placed it in my pocket. "Thank you, Trey," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was far more terrifying than a scream. "I will take this. I will use it to buy a folder for the evidence I'm about to collect." "What evidence?" Trey laughed, though his eyes darted nervously to Brittany. "You said this is your house," I said, stepping back off the porch, the wind whipping my hair around my face. "Enjoy it. Enjoy the heat. Enjoy the smoothie. Enjoy the Porsche. Because I promise you, by the time I am done with you, you won't even own the silk on your back." I turned around and walked down the path, not looking back, as the heavy door slammed shut behind me. I walked to the gate where Maya was waiting, her eyes wide with worry. "Did they have cookies, Mommy?" she asked. "No, baby," I said, taking her hand and leading her down the street, my heart pounding with a cold, rhythmic drumbeat of war. They did not have cookies. But they gave me something much better. They gave me a reason. I pulled out the $20 bill and flagged down a passing taxi. I did not tell the driver to take us back to the shelter. I gave him the address of the one place where I could find the weapon I needed to destroy them: the County Recorder of Deeds office. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The yellow Porsche gleamed in the sunlight, a beacon of their arrogance. They thought I was a failure. They thought I was trash. But they forgot one thing. I was a paralegal. I knew how to follow the paper trail. And I knew that in America you do not own what you steal. You only borrow it until the rightful owner comes to collect. And I was coming to collect everything. The taxi ride to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds office cost me the literal last dollar to my name. But as the gray limestone building loomed into view, I knew it was the best investment I had ever made. I held Maya's hand tightly as we walked through the revolving doors. The air inside was stale, recycled through vents that had not been cleaned since the 90s, and it smelled of dust and bureaucracy. To most people, this smell was depressing, but to me it smelled like home. For 10 years, this building had been my hunting ground. As a senior paralegal, I had spent thousands of hours here tracking down assets, exposing hidden liens, and finding the truth that people tried so desperately to bury in paperwork. I walked up to the front desk where a security guard I did not recognize was checking bags. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked like a homeless woman. My coat was stained, my boots were muddy, and I had a sick child clinging to my leg. If I tried to go in as a member of the public, they would make me take a number and wait for 3 hours. I did not have 3 hours. I had 72. I needed to bluff. I straightened my spine, lifting my chin with the arrogance of the woman I used to be. I marched past the line of people waiting and headed straight for the clerk's desk in the back corner. Sitting there was Brenda, a woman with bright red glasses and a collection of ceramic cats on her desk, who had been working here since before I was born. Brenda. I called out breathless, as if I had just run a marathon. Please tell me the system is not down again. Mr. Sterling sent me down here for a rush on the South Green files, and if I do not get them in 10 minutes, he is going to have my head. Brenda looked up, peering over her spectacles. She squinted at me, taking in my disheveled appearance. Layla. Lord have mercy, I haven't seen you in years. You look like you have been through the ringer, honey. And who is this little angel? It has been a rough year, Brenda, I said, leaning in close, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Divorce. Custody battle. You know how it is. That is why I am back doing freelance research. I need to get back on my feet. Can you help me out? I need the property records for 404 South Green Street. Brenda hesitated, her eyes flicking to her supervisor across the room. Technically, I am supposed to see a current badge, Layla. Please, Brenda, I pleaded, letting a single tear of genuine desperation escape. Just this once. For old time's sake. Brenda sighed and shook her head, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. You owe me a coffee when you get your first check. Go to Terminal 4. I will unlock the digital archives for you. Thank you, I whispered. I settled Maya in a chair next to the computer terminal, handing her a stack of sticky notes and a highlighter I found on the desk to play with. Then I sat down and placed my hands on the keyboard. My fingers trembled, but as soon as I felt the plastic keys, muscle memory took over. I typed in the address. 404 South Green Street. Enter. The screen flickered, and a list of documents appeared. My breath hitched. The first document was a quitclaim deed dated 8 years ago. Grantor Beatrice Hattie Thorne. Grantee Layla Thorne. Grandma was telling the truth. The house was transferred to me. I scrolled down frantically looking for the deed of sale. I was looking for the document that proved my mother sold the house to pay for my non-existent drug rehab or my student loans. I was looking for the name of the stranger who owned my home. But there was no deed of sale. The owner of record was still Layla Thorne. I sat back in the chair, the room spinning. I owned it. I really owned it. For 8 years, while I was renting studio apartments and eventually sleeping on a cot in a shelter, I was the legal owner of a historic mansion in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Chicago. But if I owned it, why was my mother living there? And why did she tell me it was gone? I turned back to the screen and began to dig deeper. If there was no sale, there had to be something else. You do not just live in a house for free. You have to pay taxes. You have to pay insurance. And then I saw it. A document filed 3 months after the deed transfer. Power of attorney. I clicked on the PDF, and it opened slowly, pixel by pixel, revealing the betrayal that would shatter my family forever. It was a general power of attorney granting Camille Thorne full authority to act on behalf of Layla Thorne regarding all real estate and financial transactions. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a signature, Layla Thorne. I stared at the ink on the screen. It was a good forgery, a very good one. But it was not mine. The loop on the L was too wide. The Y trailed off to the right instead of curling under. It was my mother's handwriting trying to be mine. She had forged my signature while I was in the hospital recovering from a car accident that happened right after law school. That was the bad place she kept referring to. She used my vulnerability, my physical pain, and the medication I was on to steal my identity. But why? Why go through the trouble of forging a power of attorney if she just wanted to live in the house? The answer lay in the next three documents. Mortgage refinance, dated 2018, lender Wells Fargo, amount $400,000. Home equity line of credit, dated 2020, lender JP Morgan Chase, amount $350,000. Second mortgage refinance, dated 2023, lender Bank of America, amount $450,000. I pulled out the calculator on the computer. I punched in the numbers, my hands shaking so hard I kept hitting the wrong keys. 400,000 plus 350,000 plus 450,000. $1.2 million. My mother had not just stolen the house. She had used the house as a piggy bank. She had used the forged power of attorney to take out loans against the equity of the property, $1.2 million in cold hard cash. Where did it go? I thought about the yellow Porsche in the driveway. I thought about my mother's political campaign signs plastered all over the city. I thought about the designer clothes Brittany was wearing. I thought about the vacation photos from Paris and Milan that my parents posted on Facebook while I was eating instant noodles. They had been living like royalty on my dime. They were not just squatters, they were parasites. They had drained every cent of equity out of the house, leaving me with the debt. I felt bile rise in my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the computer screen. I had been starving. My daughter had been sleeping in the cold. And all the while my mother was signing my name to bank documents to fund her delusions of grandeur. But I forced myself to keep scrolling. Because in the world of property law, the most dangerous document is always the most recent one. And there it was at the very top of the list. Filed just 2 weeks ago. Lis pendens. Notice of default. I clicked it open and my blood ran cold. The document was from Bank of America. It stated that the borrower, Layla Thorne, had failed to make mortgage payments for the last 6 months. The outstanding balance was $460,000 plus interest and penalties. Because my mother had stopped paying the loans. She had drained the house dry, and now that there was no more equity to steal, she had stopped paying the bills. She was letting the bank take it. She was going to let the house be foreclosed on, and since it was in my name, the foreclosure would destroy my credit score, not hers. It would bury me in debt I could never repay. I looked at the date of the sheriff's sale. The auction was scheduled for 5 days from now. 5 days. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My mother knew this. That is why she was so desperate on the phone. That is why she told me I was crazy. She was trying to keep me away until the bank took the house. Once the house was sold at auction, the evidence of her fraud would be buried under a mountain of paperwork, and I would be left with nothing but a ruined reputation. But then a thought struck me. A thought so delicious it almost made me smile. Trey. My arrogant brother who had thrown $20 at me and told me to get off his property. He did not know. And Brittany, the girl who thought she was the queen of the manor. She did not know either. My mother was a narcissist. Narcissists do not share their failures. She would never tell her golden child son that the money had run out. She would never tell him that the roof over his head was about to be seized by the sheriff. Trey thought he was sitting on a gold mine, but he was actually sitting on a sinkhole that was about to swallow him whole. I looked at the clock. The recorder's office closed in 20 minutes. I had everything I needed. I hit print. The laser printer hummed to life, spitting out page after page of incriminating evidence. The forged signature, the loan documents, the millions of dollars stolen, and the foreclosure notice that was a ticking time bomb. I gathered the warm paper into a neat stack. This was not just paperwork. This was ammunition. Brenda watched me from her desk, her eyes wide. You found something, did not you? You look like you just saw a ghost. No, Brenda, I said, sliding the stack of papers into my coat, protecting them from the world. I did not see a ghost. I saw a monster. But do not worry, I know exactly how to slay it. Come on, Maya, I said, grabbing my daughter's hand. Where are we going, Mommy? Maya asked, looking up at me with tired eyes. We are going to find Grandma Hattie, I said. And then we are going to crash a party. As we walked out of the building back into the biting cold of the Chicago night, I felt different. I was no longer the victim. I was the owner. I was the landlord. And I was about to serve the most painful eviction notice in the history of this family. They had 5 days before the bank came, but they had less than 24 hours before I came. And unlike the bank, I was not interested in the money. I was interested in justice. My mother wanted to run for city council on a platform of family values. Well, I was about to give the voters a front row seat to exactly what kind of values the Thorne family really had. The countdown had begun, and the explosion was going to be spectacular. The elevator ride to the penthouse suite of the Peninsula Hotel felt like an ascent into a different world. My ears popped as we rose 40 floors above the slush and grime of the Chicago streets, where I had spent the last 3 months fighting for survival. Beside me, Maya held tightly to my hand, her eyes wide as she took in the gold-plated mirrors and the velvet carpet. She looked small and fragile in her worn-out coat, a stark reminder of exactly why I was standing here. I clutched the envelope of documents against my chest. It was not just paper, it was a loaded gun, and I was about to hand it to the only person who knew how to pull the trigger without hesitating. When the doors opened, we were greeted by silence and the scent of expensive jasmine tea. Big Mama Hattie was sitting in a high-backed velvet chair by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city she used to rule. She did not turn around as we entered. She simply gestured to the empty sofa opposite her. Sit, she commanded, her voice devoid of warmth. And put those muddy boots on the floor, not the rug. I sat down, pulling Maya onto my lap. I did not apologize for my appearance. I did not apologize for the smell of the shelter that clung to my clothes. I simply placed the thick stack of papers on the marble coffee table between us. The sound of the heavy pile hitting the stone echoed in the quiet room. You asked for proof, I said, my voice steady. Here it is. Hattie turned slowly, leaning on her cane. She looked at the papers, then at me. Her expression was unreadable behind her glasses. She reached out a manicured hand and picked up the first document. The deed transfer from 8 years ago. She nodded once, confirming what she already knew. Then she picked up the power of attorney. I watched her eyes scan the page. I watched them stop at the bottom where the signature was scrawled. Her brow furrowed. She pulled the paper closer, adjusting her glasses. She traced the signature with her thumb. This is not your hand, she murmured. You cross your T's with a sharp strike. This one loops. Keep reading, Grandma, I said. She picked up the next sheet. The first mortgage refinance from Wells Fargo. Then the second from Chase. Then the third from Bank of America. Her breathing grew heavier with each page. Her hand began to tremble, not from age, but from a rising volcanic fury. She saw the numbers. 400,000, 350,000, 450,000. She saw the dates corresponding with family vacations to Europe and new luxury cars. And then she reached the final document. The notice of default from the sheriff. The foreclosure auction scheduled for 5 days from now. The silence in the room was suffocating. I saw the veins in her neck pulse. Suddenly she stood up with a speed that defied her 75 years. She grabbed the delicate porcelain teacup from the saucer next to her and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the fireplace, shattering into 1,000 pieces, the dark tea running down the white marble like black blood. Maya flinched, burying her face in my coat. Those parasites, Hattie hissed, her voice shaking with rage. Those ungrateful parasitic vultures. I gave them everything. I paid for your father's heart surgery. I paid for your mother's campaign startup. And they steal from my granddaughter. They steal from my great-granddaughter. She reached for the rotary phone on the side table, her fingers snatching up the receiver. I am calling the police, she announced, dialing 0 for the operator. Get me the police commissioner. I know him personally. I am having Camille and Desmond arrested tonight. I want them in handcuffs before dinner. No, I said loudly, standing up. Hattie stopped the phone halfway to her ear. She looked at me, surprised by my defiance. Excuse me, she said, her eyes narrowing. Put the phone down, Grandma, I said, stepping forward. Do not call the police, not yet. Have you lost your mind, girl? Hattie snapped. They stole over $1 million in your name. They left you to rot in a homeless shelter while they lived in your house. And you want to spare them. I do not want to spare them, I said, my voice dropping to a cold whisper that sent a shiver through the room. I want to destroy them. But if you arrest them tonight, they win. Hattie slowly lowered the phone, but she did not hang up. Explain, she demanded. If you arrest them now, I said, pacing the room, my lawyer brain taking over, they will play the victim. Mom will cry to the press. She will say it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute. She will say she was managing my assets because I was mentally unstable. She has already planted that seed. She will use her political connections to get bail. She will spin the narrative and she will survive. She always survives. I stopped in front of Hattie, looking her dead in the eye. But in 3 days it is their 35th wedding anniversary. It is also the official launch party for Mom's City Council campaign. Every major donor in Chicago will be there. The press will be there. Her rivals will be there. A slow realization began to dawn on Hattie's face. The corners of her mouth twitched. You want a public execution? She said softly. I want total annihilation, I corrected. I want to walk into that party and strip them of everything they care about, their reputation, their social standing, their lies. I want everyone they have ever tried to impress to see them for exactly what they are. Thieves, liars, frauds. I want Mom to be standing on that stage talking about family values when the handcuffs click. Hattie looked at me for a long moment. She looked at the fire in my eyes, a fire that mirrored her own. She looked at the set of my jaw, which was identical to the one in the portrait of her late husband hanging on the wall. She slowly hung up the phone. You are a thorn, after all, she said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. I was beginning to worry you took after your father. She walked over to her purse, a black crocodile Hermes bag that cost more than a car. She dug inside and pulled out a sleek, heavy card made of black titanium. The American Express Centurion card. The black card. She held it out to me. If you are going to crash a party, Hattie said, you cannot look like a victim. You need to look like a nightmare. A nightmare dressed in silk and diamonds. I took the card. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. Take this, Hattie commanded. Go to Michigan Avenue. Buy clothes. Buy jewelry. Go to the salon. Get a suite at this hotel for you and Maya. Order room service. Feed that child. And fix your face. I want you to walk into that ballroom looking like you own the building, because soon enough you might. Thank you, Grandma, I said, pocketing the card. Do not thank me yet, Hattie said, walking back to her chair and staring out at the city. Just make sure when you drop the guillotine, the blade is sharp. I gathered up the documents and took Maya's hand. We walked to the door, but before I left, I turned back. Grandma, I asked, do you still have that contact at the IRS? The one who helped you with the audit in '99? Hattie smiled, and it was a terrifying thing to witness. I have something better, she said. I have the direct line to the director of the fraud division. Why? Because I said, smiling back, stealing from family is a state crime. But tax evasion on $1 million of income, that is federal, and federal prison does not have parole. I walked out of the suite and down the hall to the elevator. As the doors closed, I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. A call that would seal the trap. I dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. It belonged to Mike, a former colleague from my law firm who had left private practice to become a lead investigator for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. He answered on the second ring. Mike speaking. Mike, it is Layla, I said, watching the numbers on the elevator panel descend. Layla. He sounded surprised. I have not heard from you since you left the firm. Is everything okay? Everything is about to be perfect, Mike, I said, my reflection in the elevator doors looking sharper, stronger than it had in years. Listen, do you still get a bonus for bringing in high-profile tax fraud cases? Yeah, sure, he laughed nervously. Why? Do you have a tip? I do not just have a tip, Mike, I said, as the elevator reached the lobby and the doors opened to a world of possibility. I have a shark, and I am going to serve her to you on a silver platter this Saturday night. Clear your schedule. You are going to a party. Sitting on the edge of the plush, king-sized bed in the hotel suite Grandma Hattie had booked for me, I stared at the phone in my hand. Beside me, Maya was happily eating room service pancakes, watching cartoons wrapped in a fluffy white robe that cost more than my entire wardrobe. For the first time in months, she was safe, warm, and full. But I could not relax. Not yet. I had the black card in my pocket and the evidence in my briefcase, but to pull off the final execution, I needed access. I needed to get inside the house one last time before the party without raising suspicion. I needed to become exactly what my mother always wanted me to be: small, broken, and desperate. I took a deep breath, summoning the version of myself I thought I had buried years ago. The Layla who begged for approval. The Layla who apologized for existing. I dialed my mother's number. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the sheer effort of the performance I was about to give. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with stress. Make it quick, Layla. I have the florist, the caterer, and the event planner here all at once. I do not have time for your drama today. Mom, I choked out, forcing a sob into my voice. Please do not hang up. I am so hungry, Mom. Maya is hungry. We have not eaten a real meal in 2 days. The shelter ran out of food last night. There was a pause. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background. I told you, Layla, my mother said, her voice devoid of sympathy. You made your bed, now lie in it. If you had just listened to me and kept your job instead of spiraling, none of this would be happening. I know, I sobbed harder, letting the desperation bleed into the phone. You were right, Mom. You are always right. I am a failure. I just want to come home. Please, I will do anything. I heard you are having the big party tomorrow. I can help. I can wash dishes. I can serve drinks. I can clean the bathrooms. Please just let me come over and work for some leftovers. I just want Maya to have a slice of cake. Silence stretched on the line. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She did not need help. She had hired a top-tier catering company. But she needed something else. She needed a punching bag. She needed to see me on my knees to feel better about her own fraudulent success. Having her daughter scrub her floors while she entertained the elite was the ultimate power trip. Fine, she sighed, making it sound like a massive burden. But you come to the back door. Do not let the neighbors see you looking like that. And Layla, if you embarrass me in front of the senator, I will have security throw you out on the street myself. Be here in an hour. And wear something black. You are working, not attending. Thank you, Mom, I whispered. Thank you so much. I hung up and the tears instantly stopped. I walked over to the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not the broken daughter who had just made that call. She was a predator waiting to strike. I turned to Maya. Baby mommy has to go to work for a few hours. You stay here with Grandma Hattie, okay? Order whatever you want from the menu. I left the hotel wearing my old, worn-out clothes, leaving the new designer outfits hanging in the closet for tomorrow. I took a cab to the corner of South Green Street and walked the rest of the way, slipping in through the servants' entrance just as my mother had commanded. The kitchen was a war zone of organized chaos. Chefs were shouting orders, trays of hors d'oeuvres were being prepped, and the smell of roasting lamb filled the air. My mother stood in the center of it all, looking immaculate in a cream-colored suit, directing traffic like a general. When she saw me, her lip curled. "You made it," she said, looking me up and down. "God, Layla, you look awful. Go to the laundry room. There is an old maid's uniform in the closet. It might be tight on you, but it is better than those rags. Put it on, and then start scrubbing the baseboards in your father's study. I want them spotless before the guests arrive tomorrow." I kept my head down. "Yes, Mom." I went to the laundry room and changed into the scratchy black polyester dress with the white apron. It was humiliating. It was dehumanizing. And it was perfect. Being the maid gave me invisibility. No one looks at the help. No one suspects the woman scrubbing the floor is actually the landlord preparing to evict them. I grabbed a bucket and a rag and headed for my father's study. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room smelled of cigar smoke and expensive scotch. This was where the deals were made. This was where the lies were constructed. I got down on my hands and knees and started wiping the wood paneling, my movements slow and rhythmic. But my eyes were darting around the room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small black device Mike had given me, a high-powered listening bug no bigger than a quarter. I crawled under the massive mahogany desk. My heart hammered against my ribs. If my father walked in now, if Trey walked in now, it would be over. I found a spot on the underside of the desk near the back leg where it would never be seen and pressed the adhesive strip against the wood. Done. I crawled back out and dipped my rag into the bucket just as the door swung open. I froze. It was my father, Desmond. He looked tired, his face gray and drawn. He was holding a tumbler of whiskey. He did not even look at me. He walked straight to his desk and slumped into the leather chair right above the bug I had just planted. A moment later, my mother walked in, closing the door behind her. Desmond put the drink down. She snapped. "We need to focus. The lawyer just called. The bank is not extending the grace period." I scrubbed the floor harder, making noise to mask the fact that I was listening to every word. But I did not need to worry. To them, I was furniture. "Let them take the house," Desmond said, his voice slurring slightly. "It is over, Camille. The campaign funds are gone. We spent everything on the remodel and the trips. We are broke. When the foreclosure hits next week, the press will have a field day." "Stop being so pathetic," Camille hissed, pacing the room. "The press won't know it is us. That is the beauty of it, Desmond. The house is not in our name." I stopped scrubbing. My hand hovered over the water bucket. "It is in Layla's name." Desmond sighed. "We stole it from her, Camille. We forged her signature. If she finds out, if the IRS finds out, we are going to prison." "She won't find out," Camille said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that turned my blood to ice. "And even if she does, who are they going to believe? The respected city council candidate or the homeless drug addict? I have already set the narrative, Desmond. Everyone thinks she is unstable." She walked over to the desk and leaned in close. "Here is the plan. After the party tomorrow, we announce that we tried to save Layla, but her financial recklessness was too much. We tell the world that the foreclosure is her fault. We tell the IRS that she took out those loans and spent the money on drugs. We pin the tax fraud on her." Desmond looked up at her, horrified. "Camille, she is our daughter. You are talking about sending her to federal prison. She has a child." "She is a liability," Camille said coldly, "and I am not going to jail for her. She is young. She can handle a few years in prison. It might even do her some good, get her clean. But I have a reputation to protect. I have an election to win." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. The pain was sharp and grounding. They were not just stealing my money, they were planning to sacrifice my freedom to save their own skins. They were going to frame me for their crimes and let me rot in a cell while they played the grieving parents on TV. I stood up, grabbing my bucket. "Where are you going?" Camille snapped, turning to look at me. "The floor is not finished." "I need more water, Mom," I said, my voice trembling. "This water is dirty." Make it fast, she said, turning back to my father. And Desmond, pour me a drink. We have a lot of work to do to prepare for tomorrow. I walked out of the study and down the hall. My legs felt like lead, but my mind was crystal clear. I went back to the laundry room, took off the maid's uniform, and put my own clothes back on. I did not finish cleaning. I did not ask for leftovers. I slipped out the back door into the cool night air. I reached into my pocket and put in the wireless earbud Mike had given me, connecting it to the bug in the study. Through the static, I heard my mother's voice one last time. Don't worry, Desmond. By this time next week, Layla will be in custody and we will be moving into a rental in the Gold Coast. Just stick to the script. She is the villain. We are the victims. I walked down the driveway past the yellow Porsche, past the fountain, past the lies. I looked up at the window of the study where my parents were toasting to my destruction. Stick to the script, I whispered to the darkness. Okay, Mom, I will stick to the script. But you forgot one thing. I am the one writing the ending. I pulled out my phone and texted Mike. I have the confession. It is recorded. Mike texted back immediately. Got it. The raid is set for 9 p.m. tomorrow. Make sure you are out of the blast zone. I put the phone away and hailed a cab. I was not going to be out of the blast zone. I was going to be ground zero. And as the cab pulled away, I smiled for the first time in months. Because tomorrow I wasn't coming back as the maid. I was coming back as the executioner. And I was going to bring the whole house down. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass window above the kitchen sink, casting colored patterns on the imported Italian marble floor. I remembered picking out that tile with Grandma Hattie 10 years ago. We had spent hours arguing over the shade of gray before settling on this one because Hattie said it hid the dirt well. Now I was down on my hands and knees staring at that same gray stone from inches away, smelling the lemon scent of the chemical cleaner and the stale odor of my own humiliation. My mother had been specific. She did not want me to use a mop. She said mops just pushed the dirt around. She wanted me to use a rag and a bucket of scalding hot water. She wanted me on my knees. Brittany sat on the island counter swinging her legs like a teenager. She was wearing a white silk robe that slipped off one shoulder, revealing a spray tan that was 3 shades too dark for her complexion. In one hand she held the glass of Pinot Noir. It was 10 in the morning. In the other hand she held her phone, scrolling through social media with a bored expression. The sound of her acrylic nails tapping against the screen was the only noise in the room, other than the wet slap of my rag against the floor. You missed a spot, Layla, she said, without looking up. By the fridge. I spilled some almond milk there earlier. Make sure you get the sticky part out of the grout. I crawled over to the fridge, my knees aching against the hard stone. I dipped the rag into the bucket, wringing out the hot water until my hands turned red. I started scrubbing. I focused on the rhythm. Dip, wring, scrub. It was meditative. It kept me from standing up and screaming that she was sitting on my counter drinking my wine in my house. You know it is really sad, Brittany said, taking a long sip of wine. Trey and I were talking about you last night. He feels bad for you, honestly. He says it must be hard being 33 and having absolutely nothing to show for it. I kept scrubbing. I did not answer. Brittany hopped off the counter and walked over to where I was working. She stood over me, casting a long shadow. I could see her expensive pedicure. Her toes were painted a bright, aggressive pink. I mean, look at me, she continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I am 25. I have a husband. I have a house. I have a future. And you? You are just kind of existing, are you not? You are like a cautionary tale. This is what happens when you let yourself go. She circled me like a shark. Trey says you used to be pretty, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. Back before the divorce. Back before you got all worn out. But I guess that is just what happens when you age. Women like you expire, Layla. You are past your prime. That is why your mom has to take care of you. That is why you are scrubbing floors. Because you have no value left in the real world. I stopped scrubbing. My hand froze on the cold tile. The anger in my chest was a physical weight, heavy and hot. She was 25 years old, and she thought she had won the lottery. She did not know she was holding a winning ticket to a game that had been rigged against her from the start. She did not know that the husband she bragged about was broke. She did not know that the house she claimed as her future was actually my past, present, and future. I took a deep breath and looked up at her. "Is that what Trey told you?" I asked, my voice quiet and steady. "That I have no value." Brittany laughed. A sharp, cruel sound. "Honey, looking at you right now on your knees in my kitchen, I would say he was being generous. You are the help, Layla, and honestly, you are not even very good at that. You missed another spot." She pointed to the floor right in front of my face. "Right here," she said. Then she tilted her glass. It happened in slow motion. The dark red liquid cascaded over the rim of the crystal glass. It splashed onto my head, running down my forehead, stinging my eyes. It soaked into the shoulder of my shirt. It splattered across the clean floor I had just scrubbed, mixing with the soapy water to create a pink, frothy mess. "Oops," Brittany said. Her voice was flat. There was no surprise in it, no apology. She stepped back and immediately held up her phone. She hit record. "Oh my God, Layla," she said, performing for the camera, her voice rising an octave in fake distress. "I am so clumsy. Look at you. You are a mess. Smile for the fans, Layla. Say hi to TikTok." Through the red haze of the wine dripping from my eyelashes, I saw my own reflection in her phone screen. I looked deranged. My hair was wet and sticky. My clothes were stained. I was on my knees in a puddle of wine and dirty water. Brittany laughed again and ended the recording. "That is going to get 1 million views," she said, satisfied. Hashtag made life. Hashtag charity case. She looked down at me one last time, her eyes cold and empty. "Clean that up," she ordered. "And do not use the good towels. Use paper towels. I do not want red wine stains on my Egyptian cotton." She turned on her heel and walked out of the kitchen, her silk robe flowing behind her like a cape. I heard her turn on the TV in the living room. I stayed on the floor for a long moment. The wine was cold and sticky against my skin. I could smell the tannins. It was a vintage Cabernet, my father's favorite. He had probably been saving it for the party. I did not cry. Crying was for victims. I was not a victim. I was a strategist gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. I slowly stood up. My knees cracked. My back ached. I grabbed a roll of paper towels and wiped the floor. I did it methodically. I did not leave a single drop. I cleaned up her mess just like I had been cleaning up my family's messes for my entire life. But this was the last time. Once the floor was spotless, I walked to the powder room off the hallway. I locked the door and turned on the faucet. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the sticky residue of Brittany's arrogance. I grabbed a hand towel and dried my skin. I looked into the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not the 33-year-old failure Brittany saw. She was not the worn-out sister. She was not the charity case. Her eyes were dark and dangerous. Her jaw was set in stone. Brittany thought she was the future because she was young. She thought she was powerful because she was cruel. She did not understand that youth fades, but ownership is forever. She did not understand that she had just humiliated the one person who held the deed to her entire existence. I leaned closer to the mirror until my breath fogged the glass. "Laugh now, little girl," I whispered to my reflection. "Enjoy your viral video. Enjoy your silk robe. Because tomorrow night, when the clock strikes 9, you are going to learn a very painful lesson." I wiped the fog from the glass, seeing my eyes clearly one last time. "You spilled wine on me today, Brittany. But tomorrow, you are going to cry blood." I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back out into the hallway. I could hear Brittany laughing at the TV in the other room. I walked past the living room without looking in. I walked out the back door into the cold Chicago air. I did not say goodbye. There was no need. I would see them all very soon. And when I did, I would not be on my knees. I would be the one holding the gavel. The Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel, was a cathedral of old money and new ambition. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gilded ceiling, casting a warm, flattering light on the 300 guests who had gathered to celebrate my parents' 35th wedding anniversary and my mother's official bid for city council. The air smelled of expensive perfume, prime rib, and the metallic tang of ambition. I moved through the crowd invisible in my black server uniform, balancing a silver tray of champagne flutes. To everyone else, I was just part of the scenery, a pair of hands offering a drink. But to me, I was a spy in the house of my enemy, recording every lie, every boast, and every toast to a success that was built on my stolen inheritance. I watched my mother Camille working the room like a shark in a tank of guppies. She was wearing a silver sequined gown that shimmered with every movement, holding court near the center of the ballroom. Senator Davis was leaning in close, listening intently as she spun her favorite narrative. "Family is the bedrock of my campaign," Senator Camille said, her voice projecting just enough for the surrounding donors to hear. "Desmond and I have built everything from the ground up. We believe in fiscal responsibility and integrity. That is what I want to bring to City Hall. A return to traditional values." I gripped the edge of my tray so hard my knuckles turned white. Fiscal responsibility. This was the woman who had forged her daughter's signature to drain over $1 million in equity from a house she did not own. Integrity. This was the woman who was planning to frame me for tax fraud to save her own skin. Across the room, I saw Trey and Brittany holding court with a group of young socialites. Trey was wearing a tuxedo that I knew for a fact was rented, but he wore it with the swagger of a billionaire. He was gesturing wildly, a glass of scotch in one hand. "Yeah, we just finished renovating the west wing of the estate," Trey boasted loud enough to be heard over the jazz band. "It has been a passion project. The property has been in the family for generations, but I really wanted to put my own stamp on it. We are thinking of adding a helipad next year for the commute to the Loop." Brittany giggled, clinging to his arm and flashing the diamond ring that was bought with my credit. "Oh, stop it, Trey, you are so bad. But seriously, guys, the house is amazing. You all have to come over for the summer solstice party. It is going to be exclusive." I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. They were inviting people to a house that was scheduled to be sold at a sheriff's auction in 4 days. They were bragging about a future that did not exist. It was a masterclass in delusion. Suddenly, my mother signaled for a refill. She snapped her fingers in the air, not looking at me, but expecting the service to be instantaneous. I walked over, keeping my head down, my heart hammering a war rhythm against my ribs. As I poured the champagne into her glass, she noticed the senator looking at me. This was the moment. She could have ignored me. She could have let me fade back into the shadows. But Camille Thorne never missed an opportunity to perform her benevolence. She placed a hand on my shoulder, a heavy grip that felt more like a restraint than a caress. "Oh, Senator, let me introduce you," she said, her voice dropping to a tone of pity that made my skin crawl. "This is Layla. She is our eldest." The senator looked surprised, smiling politely. "Oh, hello, Layla. I did not realize you had a daughter working the event. Helping out the family business, I see." My mother let out a short, tragic sigh. She squeezed my shoulder harder, digging her nails into my skin. "Well, we try to keep her busy, Senator. Layla has had a very difficult few years. She is a bit slow, you understand. She struggles with responsibilities. We thought giving her a simple task like serving tonight would be good for her self-esteem. We try to support her as much as we can, even when it is challenging." The senator's smile faltered, replaced by a look of awkward sympathy. He looked at me as if I were a broken child. "I see," he murmured. "That is very noble of you, Camille. Taking care of family is important." I stood there frozen. She had just called me slow. She had just told one of the most powerful men in Illinois that I was mentally deficient to explain why her daughter was a servant at her own party. She had stripped me of my dignity to polish her own halo. "Say hello to the Senator, Layla," my mother commanded, speaking slowly and loudly as if I were deaf. I looked up, meeting her eyes. I saw the triumph in them. She thought she had broken me. She thought I was the same terrified girl she had gaslighted for 8 years. "Hello, Senator," I said, my voice clear and sharp. "It is an honor to meet a man who values the truth so highly." My mother frowned, sensing a shift in my tone. "Okay, that is enough, Layla," she snapped, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "Go check on the dessert table. You are holding up the guests." I bowed my head one last time. "Yes, Mom. Enjoy your evening." I turned and walked away. I could feel her eyes on my back. I could feel the pity of the guests burning into my skin. But as I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, the shame evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I did not go to the dessert table. I marched past the confused chefs, past the stacks of dirty dishes, and straight to the service elevator. I punched the button for the 42nd floor. The ride up was silent. I watched the numbers climb, leaving the noise and the lies below me. When the doors opened, I walked down the hall to Suite 402. I swiped the keycard. Inside, Big Mama Hattie was waiting. She was sitting in a wheelchair not because she needed it, but because it added to the drama of her entrance. She was dressed in black lace, looking like a grieving widow, ready to bury her enemies. "Is it time?" she asked. "It is time," I said, unzipping the back of my server uniform and stepping out of the polyester shell of the victim. Hanging on the door was the garment bag from Neiman Marcus. I unzipped it, revealing the weapon I had purchased with the black card. It was not just a dress, it was a declaration of war. A floor-length gown of blood-red silk, structured and sharp, with a plunging neckline and a train that demanded space. I put it on. The silk felt like armor against my skin. I stepped into the 6-inch Louboutin heels. I put on the diamond necklace that dripped like ice around my throat. I let my hair down, shaking out the tight bun until it fell in waves around my shoulders. I looked in the mirror. The maid was gone. Layla, the paralegal, was gone. The woman staring back was the owner of the house on Green Street. She was the CEO of her own destiny. And she was angry. Hattie nodded approvingly. "You look like trouble, child." "Good," I said. We took the elevator back down. But we did not go to the kitchen. We went to the audio-visual control booth on the balcony level overlooking the ballroom. The technician looked up, startled. "Hey, you cannot be in here." I slapped a stack of $100 bills onto his console. "Take a break," I said. "Take a long break. And give me the microphone." The technician looked at the money, then at Hattie, then at me. He grabbed his jacket and ran. I looked down at the ballroom. My parents were on stage now. My father was holding a glass of champagne, looking sweaty. My mother was at the podium, basking in the applause. "Thank you, everyone," Camille said into the mic, her voice booming through the speakers. 35 years of marriage, and a lifetime of service to this community. I look at my family, my wonderful husband, my brilliant son Trey, and I feel so blessed. We have built a legacy of honesty, a legacy that I promise to bring to the city council. She paused for effect, waiting for the cheers. I reached out and killed the house lights. The ballroom plunged into darkness. The applause died instantly, replaced by confused murmurs and the sound of nervous laughter. My mother's voice cut through the dark, shrill, and panicked. "What is going on? Someone get the lights back on. Is this a power outage?" I leaned into the microphone. My voice did not boom. It purred, dark and velvety, echoing from every corner of the room. "Do not worry, Mother. The power is fine. We are just shedding a little light on the truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I could hear my mother tapping her microphone. "Who is that? Who is doing this? Security! Welcome, everyone!" I continued, my voice steady and commanding. "You have heard a lot about family values tonight. You have heard about honesty. You have heard about legacy. But every good story has a plot twist, and I think it is time for yours." I hit the switch for the single spotlight. A beam of blinding white light cut through the darkness, but it did not land on the stage. It landed on the top of the grand staircase where I stood. The red dress blazed like fire against the shadows. The diamonds at my throat caught the light, sending prisms dancing across the room. I stood tall, looking down at them like a goddess of vengeance. My mother squinted into the light, shielding her eyes. Layla. I smiled, and it was the last time she would ever see me smile. Hello, Mom, I said into the silence. You told the senator I was slow. You told him I struggled with responsibility. So I decided to take some responsibility tonight. I am taking responsibility for my house, my money, and my name. I started to descend the stairs, one slow, deliberate step at a time. The sound of my heels on the marble was the only sound in the room. I hope you enjoyed the champagne, I said. Because it is the last thing you will ever drink on my dime. The silence in the ballroom was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric with anticipation. 300 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. The woman in the blood-red dress standing at the top of the stairs. My mother Camille looked up at me with a mixture of terror and fury that I had seen many times in private, but never in public. She abandoned her podium and her senator and started marching towards the stairs, her silver gown rustling aggressively. Layla, get down from there right now, she hissed, her voice projecting without the microphone because the room was so quiet. You are embarrassing yourself. Security, get her off the stage. She is having an episode. I did not move. I did not flinch. I watched her climb the first few steps, her face twisted into a mask of desperate control. She was trying to save the narrative. She was trying to turn me back into the crazy daughter, but she forgot that I held the remote control. Stay where you are, Mother, I said, my voice calm and amplified, filling every corner of the room. You wanted everyone to know about our family legacy. You wanted to talk about integrity. So let us talk about it. Let us talk about the house on South Green Street. Camille stopped. She looked at the guests who were now murmuring. She forced a laugh, a brittle sound that cracked in the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive my daughter, she shouted, turning back to the crowd. She is not well. She has struggled with addiction and mental health issues for years. We have tried to help her, but sometimes she gets confused about reality. I smiled. It was the same lie she had told me on the phone. The same lie she had told Grandma Hattie. Addiction, I repeated into the mic. That is an interesting choice of words. Because I have the toxicology report from this morning right here. It says I am clean. It says I have been clean my entire life. But let us look at what you are addicted to, Mom. I pressed the button on the small remote concealed in my hand. Behind me, the massive projection screen that had been showing a slideshow of my parents' happy marriage flickered. The image of them cutting a wedding cake disappeared. In its place, a document appeared. It was blown up to 20 feet tall, so even the people in the back row could see every pixel. It was the power of attorney. This is a legal document granting Camille Thorne full control over my assets, I explained, walking down 2 more steps. It is dated 8 years ago, and right there at the bottom is my signature. Or at least what my mother thought my signature looked like. The crowd gasped. I saw the senator put on his glasses and squint at the screen. Camille lunged for the technician booth, screaming, turn it off right now. But the technician was gone, and I was just getting started. I hit the button again. The screen changed. Now it showed a series of bank transfers. They were highlighted in bright yellow. Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America. 3 mortgages taken out against a property that I own free and clear. Total value, $1.2 million. And look where the money went. It did not go to my rehab. It did not go to my medical bills. I pointed to the screen, my finger tracing the line of transaction. $200,000 to the Thorne Campaign Fund. $100,000 to the Porsche dealership. $50,000 to the Four Seasons Paris. And my personal favorite, $10,000 to a reputation management firm to scrub negative comments from your social media. My father Desmond was now trying to climb onto the stage, his face pale and sweating. Layla, please. He begged, his voice barely a whisper. Do not do this. We can talk about this. We are family. I looked at him. The man who had sat in his study and agreed to send me to prison. We are not family. Dad, I said, cold as ice. We are co-conspirators. Or at least you are. I am just the victim who woke up. I hit the button a third time. This was the kill shot. The screen went dark for a second, and then a video started playing. It was grainy, black and white footage from the camera I had hidden under the desk in the study just 24 hours ago. The audio was crystal clear. The voice of Camille Thorne filled the ballroom, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. The press won't know it is us. The house is not in our name. It is in Layla's name. We stole it from her, Camille. We forged her signature. If she finds out, if the IRS finds out, we are going to prison. Then my mother's voice again, sharp and cruel. She is a liability. I am not going to jail for her. She is young. She can handle a few years in prison. It might even do her some good, but I have a reputation to protect. I have an election to win. The video ended. The screen went black. For 10 seconds there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the sound of a reputation dying in real time. It was the sound of a carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust. Then the sound of a glass breaking shattered the spell. I looked down. The senator had dropped his drink. He looked at my mother with a mixture of horror and disgust. He slowly reached up and unpinned the campaign button from his lapel. He let it drop to the floor. That was the signal. Suddenly the room erupted. The donors, the politicians, the socialites, they all turned their backs. It was a wave of rejection. People started walking towards the exits, not wanting to be associated with the woman on the stage. Camille stood there frozen. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the fleeing guests. She reached out to grab the arm of a wealthy donor passing by. "Wait, it is a deep fake," she screamed, her eyes wild. "It is AI! She made it up! She is trying to ruin me!" The donor pulled his arm away violently. "Do not touch me, Camille," he spat. "You are finished." My mother collapsed. She did not faint. She just sank to her knees on the stage, the silver sequins of her dress pooling around her like broken glass. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She looked exactly how she wanted me to look. I walked down the final steps and stood in front of her. I towered over her in my red dress and my 6-inch heels. I was no longer the daughter who craved her approval. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "You wanted a platform, Mom," I whispered, leaning down so only she could hear. "You wanted the spotlight. Well, you have got it. Enjoy the view, because from here on out, the only view you are going to have is through iron bars." My father was sitting on the edge of the stage, his head in his hands, weeping silently. Trey and Brittany were nowhere to be seen, probably trying to sneak out the back door before anyone realized they were complicit. But I was not done. I turned to the few people remaining in the room, mostly reporters who were frantically typing on their phones. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice calm and professional. "I apologize for the interruption to your dinner, but I believe transparency is important. My mother promised to clean up the city. I am just helping her start with her own house." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that signaled the end of the show. I turned and walked away, leaving my mother sobbing on the stage, leaving my father broken, leaving the ruins of their life behind me. I did not look back. I walked straight towards the exit where Big Mama Hattie was waiting for me. She had a smile on her face that could have cut glass. That she said handing me my coat was better than the opera. "Let us go, Grandma," I said, taking her arm. "The police will be here in 5 minutes. And I do not want to be here when they start asking questions. I have a statement to file. And I have a house to take back." As we walked out into the cool night air, the sirens started to wail in the distance. They were coming for Camille. They were coming for Desmond. They were coming for the lies. But they were not coming for me. I was free. For the first time in 8 years, I was completely and utterly free. And as I looked up at the Chicago skyline, I knew one thing for certain. The house on Green Street was finally going to be a home again. My home. The ballroom was in absolute chaos. It was the kind of scene you usually only see in reality television finales, but this was real life, and the smell of fear was far more potent than anything that could be captured on camera. My mother was a sobbing heap of sequins on the stage floor, and my father was staring into the middle distance as if his brain had simply shut down to protect him from the horror of his own choices. The guests were fleeing toward the exits, clutching their pearls and their purses, desperate to disassociate themselves from the Thorne family name. But there was one person who was not running. One person who was too stupid and too arrogant to understand that the war was already over and he was standing in the kill zone. Trey. My little brother pushed his way through the confused crowd, his face a mottled mask of red rage. He looked like a child whose ice cream had fallen in the sand, except he was a 27-year-old man in a rented tuxedo. He marched right up to the edge of the stage, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are a liar," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You are a jealous, bitter liar, Layla. That house belongs to Mom and Dad. They gave it to me. It is my inheritance. You just made all those documents up because you are mad that you are a failure." I looked down at him from my vantage point on the stage. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I remembered teaching him how to tie his shoes. I remembered helping him with his science projects. I remembered taking the blame when he broke Dad's golf clubs. I had spent my whole life protecting him, and in return, he had thrown $20 at me and told me to get off his porch. I did not shout back. I did not need to. I simply reached into the small clutch purse I was holding and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was not a digital projection this time. It was the hard copy. The paper was heavy and cream-colored with the official seal of the Cook County Sheriff embossed in gold foil. "Read this, Trey," I said, my voice calm but amplified by the microphone I had picked up again. I crouched down and handed the paper to him. He snatched it from my hand, tearing the corner in his haste. His eyes scanned the document. I watched his face change. I watched the arrogance drain away, replaced by confusion, then disbelief, and finally sheer terror. "What is this?" he whispered, looking up at me, his hands trembling so hard the paper rattled. "It is a notice of foreclosure." "Trey," I explained, speaking clearly, so Brittany, who was standing a few feet behind him, could hear every word. "You see, because Mom and Dad stole the house using a forged deed, they also had to pay the mortgage. But they stopped paying 6 months ago. They spent the money on this party instead." I stood up and smoothed the skirt of my $10,000 dress. "The bank seized the property this morning, Trey. Technically, you have been trespassing all day. The sheriff is scheduled to arrive tomorrow at 8 in the morning to change the locks and throw your crypto mining rig out on the street." "No," Trey stammered, backing away. "No, that is impossible. Mom said the house was fully paid off. She said it was an asset." "Mom lied," I said simply, just like she lied about me being an addict, just like she lied about her campaign funds. "You are not a homeowner, Trey. You are homeless, and you are broke." Brittany let out a small, strangled sound. She stepped forward, grabbing Trey's arm. Her face was pale beneath her spray tan. "Trey," she hissed. "Tell me she is lying. You told me your parents put the deed in your name last week. You told me we had $3 million in equity." Trey looked at his wife, his eyes wide and pleading. "Babe, listen. I thought they did. They told me they did." I laughed. It was a cold sound. "He does not own anything, Brittany," I said, driving the knife in deeper. "The car in the driveway is leased in my father's name. The credit cards you use are authorized user cards on my mother's account, which is currently frozen by the IRS. And the house. Well, the house is gone." Suddenly a rhythmic thumping sound cut through the murmurs of the remaining crowd. It was the sound of a heavy cane hitting the marble floor. Thump, thump, thump. The crowd near the entrance parted like the Red Sea. Big Mama Hattie walked in. She was flanked by 2 large men in dark suits, but she did not need their protection. She radiated power. She walked straight to the center of the room, stopping right next to Trey and Brittany. She looked at them with the same expression one might use when looking at a cockroach on a wedding cake. Actually, Layla Hattie said, her voice carrying without a microphone. The house is not gone. Trey looked at our grandmother, hope flickering in his eyes. Grandma? He gasped. You fixed it right. You paid the bank. Thank God. I knew you would not let them take our home. Hattie chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound. Our home, she repeated, mocking him. I did not pay the bank to save you, boy. I bought the debt. She turned to face me, nodding slowly. I purchased the distressed mortgage note from the bank at noon today, Hattie announced to the room. I paid cash, which means I am the new lien holder. And as the new owner of the debt, I have decided to reinstate the original deed. She reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a set of keys. They were the old brass keys to the front door, the ones I had given back to my mother 8 years ago. She walked up the stairs to the stage and placed the keys in my hand. The house belongs to Layla, Hattie declared. It has always belonged to Layla. And as of 10 minutes ago, the deed has been fully restored to her name, free of any fraudulent mortgages. She turned back to Trey and Brittany. So the good news is the bank is not kicking you out, Hattie said, smiling wickedly. The bad news is your landlord is standing right there, and I do not think she is accepting new tenants. The silence that followed was absolute. Trey looked at me. He looked at the keys in my hand. He realized that his entire existence, his business, his lifestyle, his marriage was now entirely dependent on the sister he had humiliated yesterday. Layla, he started, his voice trembling. Layla, look, I did not know. I swear. We are family. You would not put your brother on the street, right? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me a failure. I gave you a chance, Trey, I said. I came to the door. I asked for help. And you gave me $20. I reached into my bra and pulled out the crumpled $20 bill he had thrown at me. I tossed it off the stage. It fluttered down, landing on his shoe. Keep the change, I said. You are going to need it for the bus. And then it happened. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment the gold digger realized there was no gold left to dig. Brittany stared at the $20 bill on the floor. She stared at Trey, who was sobbing now. She looked around the room at the ruined party, at the police sirens wailing in the distance, getting louder every second. She realized her designer life was over. She realized she was married to a man with no job, no house, and parents who were going to prison. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. Babe, please, Trey begged, reaching for her. I am a victim here too. Do not touch me, she screamed. Brittany spun around, and with all the force of her yoga-toned arm, she slapped Trey across the face. The sound was like a pistol crack echoing through the silent ballroom. You told me you were rich, she shrieked, her face twisting into ugly lines. You told me you were an entrepreneur. You are nothing. You are a loser living in your sister's basement. You made me look like an idiot. She ripped the diamond ring off her finger. This is probably fake too, she yelled, throwing the ring at his face. It bounced off his forehead and skittered across the floor. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with venom but also fear. I did not know, she stammered, trying to salvage her own position. Layla, I swear, he told me it was his house. I would never have treated you like that if I knew you were the owner. I looked down at her from the heights of my victory. I know, Brittany, I said softly. That is exactly the problem. You only treat people with respect when you think they have money, and that makes you poorer than I ever was. Get out, I commanded, pointing to the exit. Both of you. Before I have security, throw you out like the trash you are. Brittany let out a sob of frustration and ran for the door, leaving Trey standing alone, holding his cheek, the $20 bill at his feet, the symbol of his total and complete ruin. He looked up at me one last time, but I had already turned away. The police were entering the room now. The final act was beginning, and I had a front row seat. The lobby of the Drake Hotel was usually a sanctuary of hushed tones and piano music, but tonight it had transformed into a crime scene illuminated by the chaotic strobe of blue and red emergency lights. I stood near the grand staircase watching the revolving doors spin continuously as uniformed officers and agents in windbreakers swarmed into the space like a colony of aggressive ants. The air, which had smelled of expensive lilies and perfume just an hour ago, was now thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of justice. At the front of the phalanx was a man I recognized instantly. Mike. My former colleague from the law firm who had traded his tailored suits for a government badge and a gun on his hip. He moved with a purpose that cut through the confusion of the fleeing guests. He was not here for the donors or the socialites. He was here for the people who had turned my life into a ledger of debts I never owed. I watched as my parents stumbled out of the elevator escorted by hotel security who wanted them off the property as quickly as possible. Camille was still wearing her ruined silver dress, the sequins catching the flashing lights in a mocking display of her fallen status. Desmond walked beside her, looking like a man marching to the gallows. They stopped dead when they saw the wall of federal agents blocking the exit. For a moment, my mother tried to compose herself. She smoothed her hair and lifted her chin, summoning the ghost of the politician she wanted to be. She walked toward Mike, assuming he was just another public servant she could bully or charm. "Officer," she said, her voice shrill but commanding. "I am glad you are here. My daughter is having a mental breakdown upstairs." She hacked the projection system. "I need you to arrest her immediately for harassment and defamation." Mike did not blink. He stepped forward, his face set in stone. He did not look at her as a council candidate. He looked at her as a suspect. "Camille Thorne," he asked, his voice cutting through the noise of the lobby. "Yes," she snapped, impatient. "I just told you who I am. Now go get my daughter." Mike reached behind his back, but he did not pull out a notepad to take her statement. He pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. The metal glinted under the chandelier lights. "Camille Thorne, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, bank fraud, and tax evasion." My mother froze. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. What she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. Mike continued, his voice rising above the murmurs of the crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle. "We have a warrant for your arrest based on evidence that you forged the signature of Layla Thorne to secure illegal mortgages totaling $1.2 million. We also have evidence that you used these illicit funds to finance your political campaign and personal lifestyle while failing to report the income to the Internal Revenue Service." Desmond tried to step away from her, trying to put physical distance between himself and his wife, but two agents moved to block him. "Desmond Thorne," Mike said, turning to my father, "you are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and aiding and abetting. We have the audio recording from your study, sir. We know you were an active participant in the scheme to frame your daughter." "No." Desmond stammered, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "No, that was her idea. I told her not to do it. I just wanted to pay the bills. I am a sick man. I have a heart condition." The agents did not care about his heart condition. They spun him around and pulled his arms behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and final. Camille watched her husband being restrained, and then she looked at the handcuffs waiting for her. She looked around the lobby, searching for a friendly face, searching for someone, anyone who could make this go away. But all she saw were the people she had tried to impress, staring at her with morbid curiosity, holding up their phones to record her downfall. "This is a mistake," she screamed as Mike grabbed her wrists. "Do you know who I am? I am running for city council. I know the police commissioner. Let me go." "Me." "This is police brutality. You have the right to remain silent," Mike said, tightening the cuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." While my parents were being processed in the center of the lobby, Trey was trying to make himself invisible. He was standing near a potted palm tree, looking frantically for a side exit. He was sweating profusely, his rented tuxedo clinging to his skin. He looked like a trapped animal. I watched him from the stairs. I knew Trey. I knew that when he was nervous, he fidgeted, and I knew that ever since his crypto business failed, he had developed a habit to help him feel important and energized. An agent noticed him lurking by the plants. "Sir," the agent called out, "please step into the open. We need to clear the area." Trey panicked. Instead of stepping forward, he turned and tried to bolt toward the revolving doors. But in his haste, he tripped over his own feet. As he fell, his hands flew out to break his fall. From the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket, a small plastic baggie flew out. It skidded across the polished marble floor, stopping right at the feet of a K-9 unit officer. The baggie was filled with white powder. The lobby went silent for a heartbeat. Trey scrambled to his knees, staring at the drugs in horror. "It is not mine," he yelped, his voice high and pathetic. "I was holding it for a friend. I swear." The K-9 officer did not laugh. He simply signaled to his partner. "Trey Thorne," the officer said, hauling my brother to his feet. "You are under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. And since you are carrying this into a federal crime scene investigation, we are going to have a very long talk about where you got it." Trey began to sob loud, ugly, heaving sobs that echoed off the high ceilings. "Mom," he wailed. "Mom, help me." But Mom could not help him. She was being marched toward the exit by Mike. As they dragged her past the staircase, she looked up and saw me. I was standing on the bottom step, my red dress pooling around me like a pool of victory. I was holding my coat in one hand and my grandmother's arm in the other. I looked down at the woman who had given birth to me, the woman who had supposed to protect me, the woman who had tried to sacrifice me to save herself. She stopped fighting the agents. She stopped screaming about the commissioner. She just stared at me, her eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "Layla," she screamed, her voice raw and guttural. "I am your mother. I gave you life. How could you do this to your own family? We raised you, we fed you. You ungrateful little wretch." The agents tried to push her forward, but she dug her heels into the carpet. "You belong in that cell, not me," she shrieked. "You are the failure. You are the one who ruins everything. I did what I had to do to survive. I am your mother, Layla." I stepped down from the stairs. The click of my heels was the only sound in the lobby. I walked up to her until I was inches from her face. I could smell the expensive perfume turning sour on her skin, mixed with the sweat of her fear. I looked into her eyes and saw nothing but the void where her soul should have been. I leaned in close, so only she and the agents could hear me. "You are not my mother," I whispered, my voice steady and cold. "A mother protects her child. You sold me. You sold my credit. You sold my future. You sold my trust. You sold me for $1.2 million. I pulled back slightly to look at her one last time. "I am not ruining you, Mom. I am just auditing you. And I have calculated the interest. It turns out the price of betrayal is everything you have." Camille stared at me, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. The reality of what I said hit her like a physical blow. She slumped in Mike's grip, her fight finally extinguished. "Get her out of here, Mike," I said, stepping back. Mike nodded. "Let us go," he said to Camille, pulling her toward the revolving doors. I watched as they led her out into the flashing lights. I watched as they dragged my father behind her, his head hung low in shame. I watched as they hauled a weeping Trey into the back of a squad car. The lobby began to clear. The guests were dispersing, whispering excitedly about the scandal that would be on the front page of every paper tomorrow. Big Mama Hattie squeezed my arm. "You did good, child," she said, her voice gruff with emotion. "You did real good." I took a deep breath. The air in the lobby was clearing. The scent of ozone was fading. I did not feel happy. Happiness was too light a word for the heavy satisfaction settling in my chest. I felt balanced. The scales had been tipped against me for 8 years, and tonight I had finally set them right. "Let us go home, Grandma," I said, turning my back on the empty lobby. "Home?" Hattie asked, raising an eyebrow. "To the hotel." "No," I said, smiling for real this time. "To South Green Street. I believe there is a vacancy." The flashing lights of the police cruisers had faded into the distance, leaving the sidewalk outside the precinct cold and desolate. I walked out of the heavy glass doors, pulling my coat tighter against the wind. The adrenaline that had fueled me through the arrest was beginning to ebb, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But before I could hail a cab, I saw a figure huddled on a concrete bench near the bus stop. It was Brittany. My sister-in-law looked nothing like the polished socialite who had spilled wine on my head 24 hours ago. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. Her expensive blowout was ruined by the wind, and she was shivering violently in her thin cocktail dress. She was holding her phone to her ear, sobbing into the receiver. I stopped in the shadows listening. "Daddy, please," she wailed. "You do not understand. They took everything. Trey is in jail. I have nowhere to go. I need you to wire me some money for a hotel, just for tonight." I could hear the voice on the other end loud enough to carry through the night air. It was a man's voice, sharp and angry. "I saw the news, Brittany. I saw you standing there while your husband was arrested for drugs. I saw the reports about the fraud. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Your mother is devastated. We sent you to private school. We introduced you to society, and you marry a criminal and get mixed up in a federal investigation. But Daddy—" "I did not know," Brittany pleaded. "I am a victim too." "You are a fool," the voice snapped. "I told you not to marry that boy. I told you he was flashy trash. You made your bed, Brittany. Do not come back here. We do not want reporters on our lawn. Figure it out yourself." The line went dead. Brittany stared at the phone, her face crumbling. She lowered her hand, and that is when she saw me standing there. Her eyes widened. For a second I thought she would scream at me. I thought she would blame me again. But desperation is a powerful sedative. She scrambled up from the bench and ran toward me, her high heels clicking frantically on the pavement. "Layla," she gasped, grabbing my arm. "Layla, thank God. You have to help me." I looked down at her hand on my coat, the same hand that had thrown a ring at my brother's face. I gently but firmly removed her grip. "Help you," I repeated, my voice flat. "Why would I do that, Brittany?" "Because I am family," she cried, the tears flowing freely now. "You heard what happened. Trey lied to me. Your parents lied to me. I am innocent, Layla. I did not know about the mortgages. I did not know about the drugs. I was just a pawn." She looked around wildly, then leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a whisper. "Look, I can help you. I know where Trey keeps his other stash. I know where your mom hides her jewelry. I can testify for you. Just please, Layla, do not leave me here. My parents cut me off. I have no cash. My credit cards are frozen because they were linked to your mom's account. I have nowhere to go." She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with such contempt in my kitchen. "Can I just stay at the house?" she begged. "Just for a few days, until I get on my feet. I will sleep in the guest room. I will clean. I will do anything. Please, Layla. We are sisters." I looked at her, shivering in the cold. I remembered the way she had looked at me when I was begging for kindness. I remembered her telling me I was expired. I remembered her laughing as she recorded my humiliation. I reached into my pocket. Brittany's eyes lit up, expecting cash or a key. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was the crumpled brochure for the Haven shelter, the one I had kept in my pocket for months as a reminder of where I came from. I pressed it into her hand. "You said you were the future, Brittany," I said softly. "You said I was the past. Well, you were right about one thing. The past has moved on, and the future does not live in my house." Brittany looked at the brochure, her face twisting in horror. "You cannot be serious. That is a homeless shelter. You expect me to sleep there? With those people?" I smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "They have beds," I said. "They have soup, and if you hurry you might make it before lockout at 8. But Brittany, I would suggest you start walking. It is a long way to the west side." But it is freezing, she shrieked. I do not have a coat. I looked at her bare shoulders. I know, I said, turning to walk away. I suggest you ask the future to keep you warm. I climbed into the waiting town car where Grandma Hattie was sitting. As we pulled away, I watched Brittany standing alone on the corner, the brochure in her hand, looking small and insignificant against the vast, indifferent city. I did not feel guilt. I felt balance. 1 month later, the air inside the Cook County jail was stale and smelled of industrial cleaner, a scent that used to terrify me but now just smelled like justice. I sat on the metal stool on the visitor side of the thick plexiglass partition. I was wearing a tailored navy suit, my hair polished, my back straight. I looked every inch the successful lawyer I was about to become again. On the other side of the glass, the door buzzed open. A guard led a woman in. It took me a moment to recognize her. Camille Thorne had aged 10 years in 30 days. Her hair, once dyed a perfect honey blonde, was now showing an inch of gray roots. Her face was gaunt, devoid of the Botox and fillers she used to rely on. She was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. She sat down and glared at me. There was no humility in her eyes, only a simmering resentment. You look happy. She spat, her voice tinny through the speaker. I am healthy, I corrected. She scoffed, leaning forward until her forehead touched the glass. Have you come to your senses yet, Layla? My lawyer says if you drop the civil suit regarding the house and write a letter to the judge asking for leniency, they might reduce my sentence to 5 years. You owe me that much. I stared at her in disbelief. Even in a cage, she was still trying to manipulate the world. I do not owe you anything, Camille, I said, using her first name for the first time. And I am not dropping the suit. In fact, I just filed a motion to liquidate your personal jewelry collection to pay back the taxes you tried to pin on me. Camille slammed her hand against the glass, causing the guard to step forward. You ungrateful brat, she hissed. I gave you life. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. You stole the roof from over my head, I said, my voice rising slightly. You stole my identity. You stole 8 years of my life. Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I was not good enough for you? Do you know how much I hated myself because you told me I was broken? I leaned in closer, my eyes locking with hers. But I realized something in this past month. I was never broken. I was just being dismantled by someone who needed my parts to build herself up. Camille rolled her eyes. Oh, spare me the therapy speech. You think you are so superior. Wait until you have a child, Layla. Wait until you have to make hard choices. I did what I did for this family. No, I said, shaking my head. You did it for yourself. You did it for the applause. You did it for the yellow Porsche and the trips to Paris. You sacrificed your husband. You sacrificed your son. You sacrificed me. And for what? You are alone, Camille. Dad took a plea deal to testify against you. Trey is in rehab and refuses to take your calls. And me. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. I brought you something. I reached into my briefcase and held up a piece of paper against the glass. It was a court order. What is that? Camille asked, squinting. It is a restraining order, I explained, and a termination of parental rights. It means you are no longer my mother in the eyes of the law. It means when you get out of here in 10 or 15 years, you cannot come near me. You cannot come near my house. And most importantly, you cannot come near Maya. Camille's face fell. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear. You cannot do that, she whispered. She is my granddaughter. She is my daughter, I said firmly. And my job is to protect her from monsters, even the ones who share her DNA. I put the paper back in my briefcase and stood up. Layla. Wait, Camille cried, panic rising in her voice. Layla, do not walk away. I am your mother. You cannot leave me here alone. I will die in here. I looked at her one last time. I looked at the woman who had haunted my dreams for 3 decades, and I felt, nothing. The fear was gone. The anger was gone. There was only a quiet, empty space where the pain used to be. "You made your bed, Camille," I said, echoing the words she had said to me so many times. "Now lie in it." I turned my back on her. "Layla, come back!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Layla." I walked toward the heavy steel doors. Her screams faded behind me, muffled by the thick glass and the concrete walls. The guard buzzed the door open. I stepped out into the sunlight. It was blindingly bright. The Chicago wind was still cold, but it felt fresh. It felt clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of freedom. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandma Hattie. "Dinner is ready. Maya made drawings for you. Come home." I typed back 2 words: "On my way." I put the phone in my pocket and walked down the steps of the jail. I did not look back. My story with Camille was over. The sequel was just beginning, and this time I was the only one holding the pen. Snow was falling on South Green Street again, but this time I was not watching it from the cracked window of a homeless shelter while shivering under a thin blanket. I was watching it from the bay window of my living room, holding a mug of hot cocoa wrapped in a cashmere throw that smelled of lavender and peace. The house was unrecognizable from the gray mausoleum my mother and Brittany had created. I had repainted the walls a warm, inviting cream color. I had ripped up the cold marble floors in the kitchen and restored the original hardwood. The yellow Porsche was gone from the driveway, replaced by a sensible SUV that I had bought with my own money. But the biggest change was not the furniture or the paint. It was the sound. For years this house had echoed with lies and whispered conspiracies. Now it was filled with the sound of Motown records playing on the vintage turntable and the laughter of a 6-year-old girl who finally knew what it meant to be home. Maya was standing on a step stool by the 12-foot-tall Christmas tree trying to hang a silver star on a high branch. Big Mama Hattie sat in her favorite armchair supervising the operation with a cane in one hand and a glass of eggnog in the other. Hattie had moved into the guest suite on the first floor permanently. She said she needed to keep an eye on her investment, but I knew the truth. She had found the family she thought she had lost. "Hire child," Hattie instructed, pointing with her cane. "And be careful with that ornament. It belonged to your great-grandfather. He bought it the year he laid the foundation for this house." Maya giggled and placed the star perfectly. She jumped down from the stool and ran over to the piano. My Steinway. I had spent weeks cleaning it, polishing the wood, removing the scratches Brittany had left on the lid. I had hired a tuner to restore its voice. Now when I played it, the music was crisp and clear, no longer muffled by the weight of disrespect. Maya ran her fingers across the keys, playing a clumsy but enthusiastic melody. Then she stopped and looked at the fireplace where 3 stockings were hung. One for me, one for her, and one for Hattie. "Mommy," she asked, looking up at me with innocent eyes, "why is there no stocking for Uncle Trey? Or Grandma Camille? Are they coming for dinner?" The room went quiet. The record player seemed to hum a little louder. Hattie looked at me, waiting to see how I would handle it. I walked over to my daughter and knelt down so I was eye level with her. I did not feel the old pang of anxiety in my chest. I did not feel the need to lie to protect her feelings. The truth had set us free, and I intended to keep it that way. "No, baby," I said, brushing a curl of hair from her forehead. "They are not coming for dinner. Uncle Trey and Grandma Camille are in a place called prison." "Is it like a timeout?" Maya asked, tilting her head. I smiled. "Yes. It is exactly like a very long timeout. They did some bad things, Maya. They took things that did not belong to them, and they told lies to hurt people. So now they have to stay there and learn how to be better. It is a lesson. And sometimes lessons take a long time to learn." Maya nodded, seemingly satisfied with this logic. "Okay," she chirped. "Can I open one present now? Just one, please." I looked at Hattie, who winked. "Go ahead," Hattie said. "But pick the small one." As Maya tore into wrapping paper, the doorbell rang. I stood up and walked to the foyer. I was not expecting guests. The police investigation was closed. The reporters had moved on to the next scandal. I opened the door. There was no one there, just a FedEx truck pulling away from the curb and a thick envelope lying on the doormat. I picked it up. The return address was from the law firm of Sterling and Partners, my old firm, the place where I had worked as a paralegal for 10 years before my life fell apart. I brought the envelope back into the living room. My hands trembled slightly as I tore the tab. I pulled out a letter printed on heavy watermarked bond paper. "Dear Ms. Thorne," it began, "we have followed the recent events regarding the recovery of your assets with great interest. The forensic accounting skills and legal acumen you displayed in dismantling a complex fraud scheme were nothing short of extraordinary. We made a mistake in letting you go. We would like to offer you a position not as a paralegal, but as a senior associate pending your completion of the bar exam. Furthermore, the firm would like to fully sponsor your final year of law school, including a living stipend. We hope you will consider coming home." I read the letter twice. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of validation. For 8 years, my mother had told me I was useless. She had told me I was slow. She had told the world I was a liability. But the world had watched me work, and the world disagreed. I handed the letter to Hattie. She put on her reading glasses and scanned it. A slow, proud smile spread across her face. "Senior associate," she mused. "That sounds expensive. You are going to need a new suit." I laughed. "I think I can afford it now, Grandma." I looked around the room. I looked at the fire crackling in the hearth. I looked at my daughter playing with her new doll. I looked at the letter in my hand, which represented a future I had earned, not inherited. 6 months ago, I was a victim. I was a woman on her knees scrubbing a floor while my sister-in-law filmed me for likes. I was a daughter begging for love from a mother who only saw me as a bank account. I was a ghost in my own life. But I had learned the most important lesson of all. You cannot wait for someone to give you your value. You have to take it. You have to claim it. And sometimes you have to fight for it with everything you have. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. The snow was covering the sidewalk, covering the footprints of the past. South Green Street was quiet. The neighbors who had shunned me were now sending fruit baskets. The city that had ignored me was now applauding me. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the peace in this room. My mother was sitting in a cell blaming everyone but herself. My father was living in a halfway house. Trey was in court, ordered rehab. Brittany was sleeping in a shelter, probably realizing just how cold the world really is when you have burned all your bridges. They were living the reality they had created, and I was living mine. I turned back to the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the final time. They told me I was nothing. They told me I was broken. Maybe you have someone in your life telling you the same thing. Maybe you are sitting in a dark place right now, wondering if you will ever see the light. Let me tell you something. You are not broken. You are just under construction. Do not let them write your story. Do not let them hold the pen. Grab it from their hands. Scream the truth even if your voice shakes. Because the best revenge is not prison sentences or lawsuits, although those are very satisfying. The best revenge is standing in your own living room, surrounded by love, holding a letter that says you won. The best revenge is a life so full, so rich, and so authentic that they cannot even touch it. My name is Layla Thorne. I am a mother, I am a lawyer, and I am the owner of the house on Green Street. Thank you for watching my story. If you have ever had to fight for what is yours, hit that like button. If you believe that truth always wins in the end, subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments what is the one thing you are reclaiming in your life this year.